The savannah held its breath. A young gorilla writhed in agony, his massive frame reduced to a trembling prison as the coils of a giant African rock python crushed around him like living chains. Every breath came as a gasp, every second a theft of his life. His wide, human-like eyes reflected sheer terror, not just fear of death, but of being taken from his family too soon, of leaving the bond that tied him to his troop. Just yards away, 5 other silverbacks, his brothers, his guardians, his soul's tribe, stood frozen. Their enormous chests, which so often rose and fell with calm, rhythmic strength, now seemed paralyzed, caught between primal instinct and a deeper, more overwhelming shock. They were not cowards. They were not indifferent. They were warriors of the wild, but in this moment they were statues carved by fear, trembling in silence. The acacia-dotted plains, once golden with peace, had transformed into a theater of dread. The drone of insects had fallen silent, the very air heavy with the scent of despair. And there, at the heart of it, one magnificent life was being pressed out, second by second, in a cruel, tightening grip. No sound split the silence, no cry broke the air. It was as if the world itself refused to witness such suffering. But in the stillness, before despair claimed victory, there came something else, a whisper. A stirring carried on the wind as though creation itself leaned forward to intervene. The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And so the stage was set not only for survival, but for a miracle. Hours earlier, this same land had been painted in strokes of peace. The sun had risen, like a golden crown over the savannah, casting long shadows that stretched across the grasslands. The air was alive with the chatter of birds, the buzzing of bees, the subtle rhythm of a world in harmony. In this kingdom of earth and sky lived the family of 6 silverbacks, a brotherhood bound by blood and heart. Their silver saddles gleamed like shields under the morning light, each scar and mark on their bodies telling stories of trials endured and victories won. At their center stood the patriarch, an elder whose years were not etched in weakness, but in wisdom. His stride carried the authority of generations. His gaze was the compass of the troop. He was the anchor, their calm, their certainty, their living pillar. Yet, in this circle of unity, one soul stood apart, the youngest silverback, curious, restless, forever searching. His eyes wandered where others found stillness. His heart beat with the wild call of the unknown. Exploration for him was not distraction, it was destiny. And while his family's peace was rooted in tradition, his was woven from discovery. Together, they moved through the grass like a tide of living power, their steps as steady as the heartbeat of the earth. But then, the rhythm shifted. The leader's senses, sharpened by years of survival, caught something in the air. He froze, his nostrils flared. The hum of insects faltered, the birds stopped their song. Silence, not peace, but warning. He grunted low, a sound that should have drawn his troop to alertness. Yet the others, lulled by the calm warmth of the midday sun, simply sprawled across the grass, basking in a deceptive stillness. The elder's gaze swept the horizon, searching for a threat that refused to show itself. Finding none, he reluctantly sat, though unease gnawed at his spirit. And in this moment, the youngest saw his chance. His curious heart, restless and bold, pulled him toward the horizon. With one last glance at his family, unaware, serene, he slipped away, stepping into tall grasses that swayed like whispers hiding secrets. Like sheep, we all have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. His steps, though innocent, were leading him toward a fate darker than he could know. Time passed, and with it the shadows grew longer. The troop rested in deceptive comfort until absence became a weight. The leader's instincts, more precise than any clock, stirred him with unease. His eyes scanned his family, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the silence broke within him. Where was 6? A rumble, deep and resonant, rose from his chest, the sound of worry, the call of searching love. The troop stirred at his unrest. Their grunts called for the missing one, but no answer came. Their peace shattered, replaced with anxiety that rippled through them like a storm. The search began. At that very moment, unseen by them but fated to intervene, a man walked these lands. Alex, a park ranger, a quiet guardian of the wild. He was no stranger here. The earth knew his footsteps, the birds recognized his presence, and the animals sensed in him no intrusion but respect. His duty was not domination, but protection. Every day he scanned the savannah with the watchfulness of a shepherd, ensuring balance held where wildness ruled. On this day, as sweat trickled down his brow under the relentless sun, his binoculars lifted in routine, and destiny aligned his gaze with tragedy. Through the glass, the tall grass did not sway gently, it exploded in violent chaos. His heart pounded. His breath caught, he adjusted the dial, and froze. There, before his disbelieving eyes, a young gorilla fought desperately against a predator older than history itself. The python's coils wrapped in merciless rings, each one squeezing tighter, each one threatening to silence a life. The gorilla clawed, bit, thrashed, his strength monumental. But the serpent's design was absolute, to kill without mercy. Alex's pulse roared in his ears. He was no longer a ranger, he was a witness to a sacred battle of survival, one where intervention meant more than duty. It meant humanity itself would answer the call of nature. Rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. And in that moment Alex knew he could not stand by. He could not let silence claim this life. With courage burning in his veins, Alex sprinted toward the chaos. Each step was heavy with fear, for who could battle both serpent and chance? But love, that mysterious force binding humanity to creation, propelled him forward. The troop of silverbacks watched from a distance, their terror locking them still, but their eyes flickered with a glimmer of hope as the human came. The python hissed, tightening its grip, but Alex, armed only with his ranger's blade and his will, dove into the storm. His hands tore at the serpent's scales, his blade slashed at its muscle-bound coils. The gorilla gasped, air flooding back into lungs starved of breath. The battle was not man versus beast, but humanity and creation fighting side by side against death itself. With one final strike, the python recoiled, thrashing before slithering into the grass, defeated but alive. Silence followed, heavy, trembling silence. And then the gorilla rose. His chest heaved, his eyes locked with Alex's. In that gaze was something beyond fear. It was gratitude. It was recognition. It was the unspoken bond of two souls, different yet the same, joined by survival. The troop moved closer, their fear dissolving into awe. The leader stood tall, his deep eyes softening as if blessing the man who had bridged the gap between species. And the youngest, now saved, pressed his hand gently against Alex's arm, a touch both fragile and eternal. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fire and gold. The savannah, once filled with dread, now glowed with renewal. A gorilla lived, a bond was born, and a miracle had unfolded. And the wolf will live with the lamb, and a little child will lead them. This was no ordinary animal rescue. This was an emotional, true story, a heart-stopping moment of survival, a wild bond that spoke to the deepest part of the human spirit. It was proof that in the wilderness, where death prowls and shadows linger, light can still break through. Humanity had answered nature's cry, and in doing so, both were forever changed. His hands clutched the binoculars so tightly that his knuckles shone pale as ivory. Ranger Alex could feel his pulse hammering in his ears as his eyes remained locked on the brutal scene unfolding in the grasslands. Every instinct in him screamed to intervene, to charge forward, to shout, to fight, and yet, the oath of his profession weighed heavily on his soul. He had sworn to protect the ecosystem, not to bend its sacred laws by choosing sides in its eternal dramas. He was to be a guardian, not a participant. But what he saw was not just a struggle between predator and prey. It was suffering, raw and undeniable. The young gorilla's movements faltered. His mighty arms, once striking with desperate ferocity, weakened. His chest rose in shallower waves, his gaze dimmed with despair. Then a sound shattered the savannah. A scream, high, piercing, filled with terror and pain so deep it split the sky itself. That cry was not simply for survival. It was a prayer, a call to heaven, a final plea against the crushing darkness. And it reached farther than Alex's heart. It carried on the winds to the ears of those who shared his blood. The troop, 5 silverbacks, froze at first in their frantic search, then turned as one toward the cry. They knew it. They felt it in their marrow. It was not just sound, it was the song of a brother dying. With thunder in their steps, they charged, not as wanderers, not as beasts, but as family answering the cry of their own flesh. 2 are better than 1, for if either falls, one can help the other up. The earth trembled as their charge broke into the clearing, and what awaited them was their nightmare carved in living form. Their brother's body was wrapped, nearly whole in the python's crushing embrace, his face twisted in agony, his chest frighteningly still. For one heartbeat, silence cloaked the scene, the stillness of despair. And then something ancient stirred. Panic dissolved into unity. Terror transformed into strategy. The power of family, older than fear, stronger than death, awakened. The leader did not lunge in blind rage. His voice rose in a sound that shook the heavens, not a scream of terror, but a command, resonant and deliberate. A roar of authority that drew every brother into one heartbeat. Then with fists like war drums, the 5 giants struck the earth. Thump, 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 the vibrations grew louder, shaking the dust from the grass, sending tremors rolling through the soil. Dust rose in golden clouds, their massive shadows dancing. In the haze, this was no chaos. It was a declaration, an ancestral war rhythm passed down through blood and time. A language of the earth itself, announcing, "We are many, we are one, we are unbreakable." The python, a master of ambush and silence, had thrived in shadows, in stillness. But now the very ground betrayed it. The vibrations shot through its body like daggers, shattering its focus. Its head lifted, its tongue flicking wildly, sensing that the balance had shifted. It was no longer the hunter. It was prey surrounded. In that sliver of hesitation, the plan unfolded. The leader seized a broken acacia branch, it splintered. Edge a tool transformed by purpose. With measured force, he wedged it against the python's crushing coil and his brother's ribcage, prying with strength born not of desperation but of determination. At the same moment, another silverback swung his own heavy branch, slamming it down onto the python's vulnerable belly, not enough to kill, but enough to wound its focus, to make it falter. The serpent recoiled, muscles quivering under the dual onslaught. A third giant reached with trembling tenderness, his massive hand curling around his brother's limp arm. With steady, gentle pressure, he began to pull, coaxing life back from the edge, easing him from the serpent's death. Grip. A fourth, fierce yet focused, circled behind, his hands locking onto the thick, muscular tail. With every ounce of strength, he pulled in the opposite direction, prying, unwrapping, unraveling the coils. And the fifth, pounding the earth without. Pause. Kept the rhythm alive, the thunder that broke the serpent's soul. It was not chaos, it was music. A symphony of survival written in the ancient language of unity. The serpent shuddered. Its body, once the embodiment of suffocating death, trembled beneath a greater force. Family. Its will, carved by centuries of predation, cracked under the relentless assault. With a violent convulsion, the coils loosened. Breath ragged. Trembling returned to the fallen silverback. The python, its domination broken, slid back into the grass, retreating without pride, its hunger defeated. It vanished like a shadow dissolving in light. Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And so it was proven, not brute strength, but bond, not fangs, but family had won. The day. Silence fell again upon the clearing. But this time it was not the silence of death. It was the silence of relief, of tender reunion. The troop gathered around their brother, his body trembling, his chest rising in shallow but living breaths. His eyes flickered open, filled not with despair but with fragile hope. No wild cries of victory erupted. Instead, there was gentleness, a love so profound it could only be felt in silence. The leader lowered himself beside his brother and began to groom his fur, a ritual of healing, a whisper of reassurance. You are safe, you are home. Another laid a heavy hand across his back, the touch of reassurance, a promise that he was not alone. Soft rumbles vibrated in their throats. the language of comfort spoken not in words but in waves of love. Together they surrounded him, creating a circle of safety, a fortress not of stone but of bond. From his distant post, Ranger Alex slowly lowered the binoculars. His breath escaped in a trembling exhale, his chest heaving as though he too had been freed from the coils. His eyes burned with tears he did not try to hide. He had not simply watched a rescue. He had witnessed the revelation of a truth greater than any book or law. Strength was not in muscle. Victory was not in domination. True power was in family, in unity, in the unseen threads that bound life to life. In the beating of fists, in the grooming of fur, in the touch of one hand on another, Alex saw the reflection of his own species. He saw humanity mirrored in the wild, and in that moment he understood to protect them was not a duty but a sacred calling. How good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity. As the sun bled into the horizon, casting the world in hues of fire and gold, the troop rose together. Their injured brother stood, unsteady yet alive, supported by hands stronger than any serpent's grip. They moved as one into the tall grass, their silhouettes swallowed by the glow of dusk, a family restored, a bond unbroken. Alex, smiling, through tears, whispered a vow into the wind. I will tell your story. The world will know your strength. The world will learn your lesson. And now, you who hear this story are part of that vow. Because this is more than an animal rescue. This is an emotional, true story of survival, a heart-touching animal miracle, a viral YouTube story born of family and faith. It is proof that the greatest strength of nature and of humanity lies not in the sharpest tooth or the hardest fist, but in the unbreakable bond of love. As the last light of day stretched across the savannah, painting the world in fire and gold, the troops stood united. Their brother, battered but breathing, leaned on the strength of those who had refused to let him go. No creature in that moment was greater than they, not because of muscle, not because of roar, but because of love. They had faced death and chosen life, not alone but together. Ranger Alex, his eyes wet with tears he didn't bother to hide, lowered his binoculars slowly. His chest rose and fell with a long, trembling breath, his heart forever changed. What he had witnessed was not merely an animal rescue, not simply a survival story, it was a revelation. Strength was never meant to be the absence of weakness. Strength was the presence of unity. It was family, it was bond, it was love made visible. The gorillas, their language of rumbles and gentle touches filling the clearing, turned as one to guide their brother home. And in that circle of devotion, Alex saw the reflection of humanity itself, the reminder that we, too, are strongest when bound by compassion, when we refuse to let each other fall. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. The injured silverback lifted his weary eyes once more toward the horizon, and though his chest still trembled, a spark of life glowed in them again.